I had a bad year. Oh boy, 2024 was truly incredible. After the prior 4 years at bad music so bad I nearly quit, it was so refreshing to have a year as big and as special as this one. I have never seen a year this big, and the effects it'll have on years to come are yet to be seen. The quarantine blues might finally be over, even if the damn virus isn't. However, we're not talking about that side of the year. This is the worst list. The only good thing about last year was that Weezer didn't release an album, and we didn't even get that. It was so bad I forgot about them entirely. Thankfully, I found the bad music not nearly as boring as last year, though it's hard to explain. On one hand, I found the bad music this year insufferable, mainly because all of it sounded identical. Where music felt brighter and more energized than ever, I was shocked at how much the bad music blended into a strange amorphous blob. On another hand, the bad music was offensive. Dreadfully offensive. Whether Drake accusing Kendrick of hitting his wife and then trying to backtrack towards the pedo claim from Kendrick, whether it's whatever Kanye was doing, or the myriad of trash that came out in between, or even the slush and spum from the mainstream country world like this shit. Wow, this is abysmal. This song is the soundtrack for commercials of giant trucks with a tiny ass, because that's what I want to pick up for, a tiny ass. No space at all. Enough space to carry a child's carcass. And that's not the only one. Lonely road, take me home. Yes, turn my ears into anuses. However, I judge music by its failure to evoke anything. Emptiness and boredom tend to strike my nerves because you didn't try. The bad albums on this list truly astound me. I have not seen albums fail in the way these ones did. You may even hate some of these entries, but one, I don't lie into, I'd rather have my own options. Last year, I wanted to do a worst list, but everything I wanted to put on it could be summed up like this. Boring. Here, I actually found all of these throughout the year, and I didn't have to listen to anything I didn't want to. Woohoo! I don't see any point in getting upset at the lazy Kanye or lazy Drake album in a year like this, especially because offending me is still an emotion better than boring me. And it's usually the intention. If they make something offensive and I get offended, they won. Honestly, I just want to do the best list. Let's get this over with. Lastly, if you like any album on here, go listen to it. This is my assessment, but even the worst albums are still usually better than boring albums I don't even bother with. Let's go! Let's start with something easy. For many people, this album was perfectly acceptable. I forgot about this album so many times throughout the year. If I hadn't written it down, I would have started with the next entry and no one would have cared. I put this on the list because it sucks in a very basic way. It's very empty, all the songs are beyond short, and you can forget about it as quickly as you start it. What gets me, especially with this band, is that it's Sleater-Kinney. One of the prime Riot Girl bands during its latter days, but specifically, their self-titled album is great. This album was crafted with a bit of drama that forced one member out, and the whole album is just oozing with spite. There is nothing here. This sucks. Many said they thought it was okay, some even liked it. I don't think they're wrong, but I would argue you could probably find much better. Someone who says this is their favorite album probably thinks every album is their favorite album. That the best song of all time is even bestlier than the previous bestest song of all time. Next. I'm so sick of the goddamn Beatles. I don't know much about Kula Shaker. Well, I know a little bit. But their albums use a bunch of Hindu imagery while the band members are whiter than my dad. I'm not even crying appropriation this time. I'm crying generic. Rich, lily-white psychedelic bands love ethnic religious imagery. It's the laziest form of enlightenment. Lucid Planet went to other fucking planets is what I'm saying. I hate this album style so much. It replicates the 60s Beatlemania with the early psychedelia of the time mixed in with the power pop, along with the vocal sims of Bob Dylan. You are blessed. You will receive no notifications, only de-hypnotizations. War machine, you know what I mean? It's a very bad scene. Cock-a-doodle-doo, the cow says moo. What's my problem? The Beatles were at their prime nearly 60 fucking years ago. I am so tired of bands idolizing the goddamn 60s. The bands from the 60s were not this bored of it. They were actually trying. Somebody calls you, you answer. Kula Shaker have been around for a while, and their album K was more progressive rock, well, this is just shit. I think of all the albums, I hate this one the most, even though this is the most competent. The vocal accents are bad, the guitars are boring, the mixing is annoyingly chipper. And for the record, I hated King Gizzard's Butterfly 3000 for the same reason. The 60s hippie period had the most annoying upbeat songs in the world. There are some highlights. The song with Shuralaya is pretty good. Frankly, when the album doesn't sound retro and actually does something modern, I don't hate it. When it sounds like the past, which it does for a bit, I hate it.
Hey little boy, what you got there? Did you find it in the sandy ground?
Next. I didn't want to put this on the list. I'm not going to grandstand over Tones and I's bitter reputation. I'm actually on the side with the people who thought Welcome to the Madhouse was the worst album of 2021, because it was. I get negativity as a prune, but honestly that album sucked, was super generic, poorly mixed, and filled with problems even for a debut. Beautifully Ordinary looked at the brutal backlash and moved in the complete opposite direction.
Could you still be the one for me? Oh.
Now, the album is restrained and typical for a pop album. There are elements of gospel, dance, disco, and more. And a bunch of boring-ass ballads, and it's beyond long. One problem this year with the albums is that many of them were 16-plus songs, and honestly, it was beyond exhausting. I look at Chelsea Wolfe's album, and I'm already like 7 out of 10, just because it's not so goddamn long. I know Tones and I has a fan base, not a very passionate or loud one, but they exist. I know this because I technically am one. I have a bit of sympathy for Tones because of the effort they put into their music. Even for as bad as Madhouse was, the worst part was how generic and dull the ballads were. And some of it I could say I didn't see other albums fucking do, and hey, it made me feel something. Seeing Cactus Malpractice, though sympathetic, struggle to defend some of the songs hurts my heart. That man has no hatred.
Makes me shimmy. Rack my brain. Rack my brain. Rack my brain.
Yet, here's the problem. Tones and I wants to be inspirational. She wants to be a post-lord pop star like Alicia Cara or Halsey who makes music that's inspirational. At the same time, she wants approval, and both of these things are horrible things to want as a pop star. You can't have everyone admire you and like you when you want to be popular to everyone. That just doesn't happen. Tony's worst songs are boring-ass ballads about how you will make it, that perfectly fit behind a commercial, that perfectly fits in some shit-ass Walmart playlist. Both this debut and this album are trying way too hard for the music being produced, because Tones doesn't work as a pop star. She doesn't have the voice for it, she has the raspy kind of voice Camila and the Sniffers has. Honestly, she should go in the direction Cher went in, making large arena rock songs that fit that voice. Her attempt to match Halsey's vibrato killed Welcome to the Madhouse. This album proves she can sing, she just doesn't in the way she's good at. I would argue the mixing killed Madhouse, where the cleaner work here kinda helps her, but honestly she just shouldn't do pop. If Spearhead and Michael Franti can make the same nothing music that Tones and I wants to in a completely different genre and succeed fine, then you don't need to stick with pop. I'm rooting for you. Literally added this while writing the goddamn list. This is Townshend's power metal album, at least for the first half. The second half is more acoustic and soft, which is great because it gives me the chance to bitch. I hate when hard bands pick up an acoustic guitar. They call it the Coldplay effect. I call it the put down the fucking guitar you slut effect. Nothing makes me more annoyed when a heavy-hitting album gets soft in the end, and this album ends with a joke country cut about millennials and coffee. Am I right? You started off about a slightly non-serious album about nerds getting up and going and deflated into a shitty That Handsome Devil ripoff? When I first heard this album, I read Devin Townshend started off in extreme metal. The first song I heard from him was March of the Poozers, which I love to death, and that song starts by calling me gay. My question is, why'd you stop? It sucks. I'm putting you under Tones and I for that last track. I've heard that joke since I was 5. Stupid. Next. Oh I'm so sick of this band. The first band I ever sought to explore the entire discography of, fun fact, was The Offspring. I read up about their corporate and legal problems and immediately lost interest in the idea. The Offspring aren't really a punk band as much as they're a pop metal band by Dexter Holland featuring Noodles. The one thing I like is that the story of Noodles is really inspiring. High school janitor turned into a rock star. Inspiring. Maybe Tones and I should do that. Cut that. Dexter Holland should dye his hair orange and get big, thick glasses. The last Offspring album was meek and forgettable. Let the Bad Times Roll was not a great album, but it had some tiny highlights here and there through the pop slop. Supercharged is not that. There are 2 songs on the album that reference meme culture. They aren't good. I was hoping this album, especially with the way it starts, would be pretty alright, but this is just another attempt for The Offspring to make any kind of return. Note that Blue Oyster Cult made a song, Florida Man, about the meme, and it only worked because Blue Oyster Cult is the type of band to do that. Their best song is called Shooting Shark. The Offspring has been trying to be pop culture mockery since Americana, and they've never been good at it. I don't hate all of their pop stuff either, but they're at their best when they make great pop metal. They're at their worst when they make pop music.
Girl that you want is directly out in front, and she's waving her caboose at you. You sneeze, I choose you.
This is an attempt to do what Green Day did this year, and they failed harder. I don't even get it. Your biggest hits are all hard rock and pop punk tracks. Maybe 2 or 3 are pop songs. Nobody who likes The Offspring wants a pop song out of it. Either your label has severe brain damage or you don't understand your audience. As the year came to a close, I like to do a little look through the Wikipedia article of album releases for anything I might have interest in and not donate any money to them. I did this for 2022 and 23. I learned about Tortuga's iterations because of that. I did that this year, and this album piqued my interest. A 3-way split between Primus, Pucifer, and A Perfect Circle? How could I not listen to that? The answer is because it sucked. This is technically a single, but I don't care. Look, it counts and I'm mad. You're probably not surprised this album isn't good. This is clearly the label trying to just cram some old tracks together on a single that would get traction by band by IP alone. Because if these 3 bands worked together, the fucking old people would never shut up about it. The 90s kids would be ejaculating blood. Primus is the only one I suspect who really had nothing to do to contribute because their song is the worst, and of the 3, they're probably the best band on here. Pucifer's last album was dull and empty, much to my disappointment, and for some reason are moving in an annoying alien direction. My favorite Pucifer songs aren't Country Boner either. They're The Humbling River, The Remedy, and their Quarantine shitpost. They're at their best when they play into themselves, not when they do this stupid Magic Mushrooms nonsense, and frankly, I don't like A Perfect Circle. They're not bad, just another late 2000s alt-metal band. The only track of theirs I enjoy is Judith for obvious reasons. It was marketed fine, but frankly, label vomit like this is just annoying. A Perfect Circle's track is probably the best, and Pucifer's forgettable, but this sucks. Next. I was listening to Colder on his worst list, and this popped up. I don't remember this album. It was kind of dull. I listened to him, he said it was really tired and boring, and thinking on his words, yeah. However, this Pixies album isn't really here because their attempt at copying the Mountain Goats failed. There's so little to say about the album I can't bother. Instead, the problem is that this was just one of dozens and dozens of legacy releases. Sweet, Deep Purple, Pixies, and The Offspring, along with, I swear, dozens more, coming out of the ground like zombies to celebrate the Green Day release being better than atrocious. What a victory! This spot is for all of these legacy albums, including the Blue Oyster Cult album. The only good one was The Cure's album. Anyway, Pixies album bad and kinda boring. Same for all the other shit-ass legacy acts. Go back to bed. This was originally the top of the worst list, so yeah, rough year. The Strumbellas, as I mentioned in my clusterfuck video, are a country pop band that released a fantastic country album and a fantastic folk pop album. Everything else is in between. Part-Time Believer is their first full dive into pop, and it sucks. This would probably make more sense before the streaming era. The band is having fleeting success and moves to a more pop genre to catch up. This is what Blue October did, and it was atrocious. However, the Strumbellas are a one-hit wonder, and it was their pop song off their pop album. Except that Spirits is a song about PTSD and fearing death at every corner.
I got guns in my head and they won't go. Spirits in my head and they won't go. When the gun still rattles, oh.
It's a weirdly chipper tune about the fear of death. It's a weird pop song and is their only hit in the States as far as I know. Also, they're from fucking Canada, which is basically playing pop music on training wheels. No offense, but I'm right. I don't know what hits they get in Canada, but this band succeeds best with songs like Sailing, Lakes, Running Scared,
'Cause I'm running scared, and I'm running scared.
and even the opener to this album, which is pretty good, Hold Me.
So hold me, I don't wanna be lonely. Wishing somebody told me things are not as they seem.
It just sucks that the rest of it is fucking lame. It's basic pop music with little flair. The thing is, I really understand why bands that have such a unique sound choose to sand it off for pop success when they barely got pop success in the past. I know people will defend this because poptimism, and I wouldn't have much of a problem with that if the album is good, but their venture to pop has sanded out what makes them interesting. If this came out in 2023, I wouldn't have even mentioned it. In a year as good for indie country and folk as 2024, to be so mediocre is a crime worth sleeping over. Good night. Fuck it.
What a damn.
For the record, this isn't on here because conservatives like Oliver Anthony. I'm not that shallow. Yet. Plus, there's other conservative music I do like. I like Poor Man's Poison. I like Luke Combs. Why didn't you guys fall in love with those artists? What's wrong with you? In 2023, the year was so boring, we heard out a redneck ginger about how the rich are ruining the working class.
Dollar ain't shit, and it's taxed to no end.
As are those welfare queens.
God, if you're 5'3" and you're 300 pounds, taxes ought not to pay for your bags of fudge rounds.
Sort of. The welfare queens could just be the rich too, but the song wasn't written that well, and the people who championed the song sure knew what they thought it was about. Either way, Anthony did a Reputation courtship and appeared on Jordan Peterson to make up for it. I mean, he actually didn't charge for his concerts because he wanted to motivate the people. Remember that. In 2024, a mixer allowed him to make this. Keep in mind, I learned about this album from Spectrum Pulse, and learning it had verses from the Old Testament certainly intrigued me. I went into this album with nothing but positive feelings. God, I wish I could still have those. Let me explain my position better. The closer track, Mama's Been Hurting, goes like this.
It's the end of the world, nobody knows. 'Cause they all just stare at the trash on their phones.
Okay, sir, I'm sorry, but I thought this was about your mother? Some sucks, man. This whole album is filled with lines like this. He goes on a tangent about, I've worked so hard, I don't need to give you nothing, you work for your pay. You live in the woods and you're barely 30, you haven't done shit. There's a song where he bitches about how young people ain't eating bacon no more, instead they eating bugs.
People eating bugs 'cause they won't eat bacon.
Okay, 1, bacon is disgusting, ham is way better. 2, no one is eating bugs. You heard that on a podcast or on a Justin Timberlake album. Not everything you hear on the internet is true. Bacon is not an American tradition. Cheeseburgers are. Idiot. I'll be fair and point out that he is from the Appalachians, a poor region of the US neglected by liberal politicians and figures for catty reasons that are too complex to get into. That was absolutely hammered this year by disaster. That region is mostly abandoned farmers and miners who live off the grid and mostly rely on each other. He's also from a Confederate town, and from what I'm guessing he recognizes something. Look, the only good song is Rich Man's Gold about
A good woman, oh Lord, you don't need that rich man's gold.
you know, the rich man's gold. Honestly, that's it. The Testament verses don't add much. They're mostly just,
Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless.
to me, the problem is that Oliver Anthony is good at being a musician with some musical chops and wants to be a pastor. You can do those things, Anthony, but you can't do both. You're bad at it. Pick one. I'll be upfront that when I listen to albums, I typically listen to them one time and maybe some tracks I like later. Up until I do a video, I don't listen to them that much more. I listened to this album 3 times by accident because I kept forgetting I did. Possibly 4. I have a list of albums I keep track of, and it's on there twice. Despite having the most beautiful album cover I have ever seen, this is a generic metalcore emo project with too much autotune where every song sounds like shit. It is bloated and overblowing, the singing is annoying, and the writing is so forgettable. I listened to this 3 goddamn times by accident before I realized this thing sucked. It sounds like shit. I still can't remember much else. Next! This might surprise you. I tried to write out my thoughts on this album multiple times, and that video never surfaced for complicated reasons. If it wasn't for the 4 great songs on this album, more 2 great and 2 really good songs with flaws, I would probably put this at the bottom. I hate the meta-irony that this album employs. It ultimately comes to the conclusion of a shrug and who cares mindset that I despise. My original video hyping this project up has a random rant about climate change because I'm a moron, and even then, I would still argue that the bright-eyed spider in that video thought the album was doing something clever. Then, We Make Hits released and it sucked. Then, When the Laughter Stops came out and I knew the album was doomed. It dawned on me that I was wrong, but also that the album was going to be quite bad. This bad, I did not expect. This isn't me saying the band will never release anything good again. I'm sure they will. It's more that this album really makes me side-eye the overload. We Make Hits is a half-baked track about making money off criticizing capitalism with a massive society subtext sign next to it. It doesn't sound that great either. Grifter's Grief sucks. It all just sucks. They have an entire song about a therapy session where it eventually devolves into, I'm exaggerating and making this shit up, fam.
Are you making this up?
Some of it, yeah, why?
Well, what are you doing that for?
Well, I just didn't want to burden anyone with the truth.
The truth?
Because I know now I'm never gonna get my Utopia.
And I'm like, where are we going? What's the point? The closer is the narrator going off to live off the land, away from the society, and face all that's wrong. And I get the critique. It's just, why? Why is the rise of bands like MGMT and Yard Act being absolved into capitalistic interests bad? What does it mean? Why is it bad only some people get to fulfill their narrative? Why does it matter some people see problems and go off and fuck off in the woods? Why do we expect narratives? Why would you make music like this? The whole album has this wink and shrug, and the moments it doesn't are glorious. Petroleum is a genuinely dark and gritty new wave track about being overworked into nothing. Dream Job is a genius satire of how office culture corrupts. Down by the Stream is such a good song.
Jono was a good guy. I think his dad came over from somewhere else or sometime in 85. I really remember, but he was different to ours. And Jono had been dead till he was 4 'cause he had this weird wax build up in his ears.
Recapping the innocence and regret of youth before dropping into bitter resentment as the cycle of violence continues.
And draw the curtains on life feeling just that little bit.
The sharks start circling and the nights get longer. Jono, I never said sorry to your face, so I'll say it in this song. I was young, but more so I was wrong. And I swear down, if I found out my own son had been picking on someone, but when he came home from school, I'd grab that little fucker by his rucksack, pin him up to the wall and scream in his face until he'd never dare make another person feel shitty at all.
I hate that this album mostly concludes with a shrug. And granted, I could be wrong. One day this could be a masterpiece to me. One day this experimental swing punk album might work. I might get it. I might look at its half-assed attitude and finally click. I'm not in the fucking mood. I gave this album 5 or 6 listens before I gave up. I hate this fucking album. I hate art that has this meta-irony of nothing matters, where the conclusion doesn't matter because you're not supposed to care. I'll still be there rooting for Yard Act. I like them enough and they try hard enough, but fuck this album. I'm sorry. I gave Mike the Snoot a lot of shit because parasocial, you need to log off. Tends to get to me. I'm not good with socializing, I'm sorry. It's not my fault the only acceptable topics in men are the economy, the weather, and trans people. While I do have problems with him, I really like his Camila Cabello video. I wish it was longer than 10 minutes, but you know, you get what you can. I listened to this album because of him, and I just can't. This album is just not finished. The thing is, I can list the problems with it, but why would I do that? You know why it's on the list. See, XOXO is a rare album train wreck, but it comes from a band member of Fifth Harmony. I was told Fifth Harmony stans were particularly intense, but apparently not anymore because they all disappeared. 2 other members of this collective actually released albums, and apparently they weren't. I don't know what happened to them. What happened? I know too much about celebrities I don't listen to. Camila Cabello got really popular around 2017 and 18 through a variety of singles like Havana and The Middle and the other ones. I remember her from Nicotine, Halloween, this is my spleen, I'm a jelly bean. The one where she smokes several packs a day. I don't feel bad. There was a bit of discourse around this album, but the main reason it happened was because Cabello needed to get her career back on track. And this album sounds like a rushed, unfinished project made in an attempt to catch up. And honestly, it just sounds hollow. I feel like I would like this album more if it wasn't trying so hard to be different, because it sounds like Cabello has ran out of ideas and is just grasping for anything to try. The big hit off the album is a Drake collab, and it precedes an entire Drake song.
Just take the things I say as truth. There's not a measure. And
Who does that? Who puts someone else's entire song on their album? Under their credit. I know he isn't paying her to be on the album, or at least when it was being made, especially from such a culture vulture as Drake. I don't know what Cabello's strong suits are. She has a slightly alternative voice, she has a Latina heritage or something, but her music is the kind you'd hear from Cyrus or Halsey that's meant for a dedicated audience, not the kind meant to get pop hits. I think she'll be fine. Cabello is still a very popular artist, and I could even suspect XOXO getting reassessment in a few years, but maybe don't aim for the kind of disorderly hyperpop when your career is fleeting. Just an idea. And on another note, I don't really like how the backlash formed out of the ashes of Brat. There's this tendency for pop fandoms to pin pop women against each other, and in this album's case they did. This was something I saw the entire year, and it got exhausting. I don't think it's fair to pin everyone against each other in such a colorful and beautiful year, especially in regards to the literal champion of the year for many. We can like multiple of these albums, and we should. Many were really interesting and some were really good. It doesn't have to be a competition. I don't think XOXO fails because Brat succeeded. I think it fails on its own merits. Little addition for something. You would think that being this worst list is so much longer than the previous years that surely this year was a lot worse for bad music, but no. Like, I know I didn't put that many albums on 2023's list, but believe me, I had a lot to go through. I bring that up because, well, last year I put Hard Reset on my worst list, one of the colder suggestions, thanks Mac. That album was much worse than this one, but I had somewhat high hopes for this one. However, it's not a very good metalcore album, spare one song. Eye for an Eye is a genuinely great song, even if it does kind of ring as melodrama. The album is filled with fairly awful metalcore experience, each track being a different experiment. Creates the illusion of a burrito. I should point out that this is pretty common for metalcore, but my main issue with this album is the problem with modern metalcore. Every song is a slightly different experiment and very little of it works. Hard Reset sucked, but it was generic and dull. I can tell Chaosbay are trying, so I feel a little bad, but the album is just one of many generic metalcore albums that I tried, and almost all of them sound like this. No, I'm not afraid. The problem is that modern metalcore has this problem where it can be successful and have hits, but for some reason the bands in metalcore don't realize it's the heavy shit people want. And this album sounds like the type of butt metal that gets played on the radio that sucks ass to listen to outside of a large truck with a tiny ass. It's basic and annoying and sloppy. Next. I haven't made any of those videos, but every year I find that one generic death metal album. Last year was Mortal Blood. I could have a field day with that, especially with its Shakespearean poetry. In 2022, it was Somnus Throne, which was so forgettable I listened to it walking to work and walking back, and only later did I realize I forgot about it again. In 2021, it was something from 1991, I forget. It was re-released and remastered in that, I forget. It was boring, trust me. Basic construction, Shakespearean or Frost-style poetry, and usually this thou-ass writing. Well, this is this year's, but rest assured, let me say this first. Don't make music like this. This is the most generic death metal album I've ever heard. From the eyeball album cover, the vintage poetry writing, to the gore covers. However, Living Chaos embodies my least favorite metal subgenre, growl metal. When I lived at a moldy inn, or my old house, we had this redneck neighbor who beat his kids and wife and was genuinely useless. Even his prostitutes hated him. Anyway, he would loudly listen to growl metal, or as my mom called it, Gwar metal, which is a shame because Gwar are pretty good somehow. Growl metal is the kind of visceral, angry metal I heard the most this year, and I hate it. If it wasn't for this album, Chaosbay would be in hell. The shrieks of black metal invoke fear. The rage in death metal invokes primal rage. The desperate cries in doom metal invoke terror. The angry white boy in nu metal invokes something. Growl metal invokes vomit. Metal at its best makes you feel like an angry kaiju rampaging and destroying all in your path. At its worst, it makes you feel like you're arguing with your dad. Do the fucking dishes! Every passage, every blast beat, every fucking riff is plucked from the tropes of death metal down to a fucking T. I have heard this exact album dozens of times. I listened to way too much metal this year, and of all the crappy albums, this was the worst. I'm sure the band put effort into it. Not enough for that matter, but this sounds like metal in the mid-2010s when the genre was stagnant and almost dead, when everything sounded like this. Fuck music like this, try harder. What the fuck is this? Heard about this band from Colder, and it sounded so awful I had to bite. Glad I did, because this is somehow only third from last. My voice is giving out. I've bitched and moaned about how music tubers on this platform talk about classics and popular shit too much. This album is why. It's this satirical album about the famous bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Peter, Paul, and Mary and how overpopular they are. But also, aren't they great and they totally deserve it and aren't they just the coolest? On top of the album sounding so generic and shitty, it might as well be that fuck shit album by Green Day. It is morbidly awful in a way albums rarely get to. I will commend it for going the distance, but the Bug Club did this album properly, and also they don't suck off on old names. This album is essentially self-infatuation. I did a video over a year ago about Greta Van Fleet, and it touches on the nostalgia problem and how people don't try new things because of the acceptability in only listening to existing popular shit. Next. In 2017 or 2019, I didn't check and I don't care, Glass Animal's debut was met with lukewarm reception for some reason. I heard some of it, it sucks. The 2020 album, Dreamland, was less than a decent project about memory and precious moments, even though it combined elements of indie, lo-fi, hip-hop, pop, and rock down until it was basically nothing. And Heatwaves was on it.
Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June.
Sometimes in the middle of June. Awful. Every time. Well, here's their pop comeback, and it's somehow worse than Glasgow Eyes.
Asking us undressed with the witness, had a honeymoon in Texas, went to Little Venice, told him with your
AJR would have the idea to try slightly. Fucking Weezer would write better goddamn pop trash than this shit. And when it comes to Weezer, I'm the biggest hater. Glass Animal's pop album is shit. It's generic and annoying and not at all good. Fucking basic and commercial in all the same ways as their last album, just not with any theme. Down to the fact they censored the swear in their own album title. I don't know what this band is doing, but they suck at it. Next. When it comes to 2024, most people would pick the most offensive album or the most despicable album for their top spot. With how much has changed this year and how much the echo of 2024 will probably be heard for years to follow, I think the best choice would not be an album that looked forward but pulled back, and more importantly, one that fucking lied to me. Let me be clear. I did not go into this album expecting to hate it. I really, really thought that I would like something from this album. I don't love Imagine Dragons, and I never did. Their music is awfully boring, and their best songs are rare. I will stand for some songs on Origin and Smoke and Mirrors, but frankly, the Mercury anthology was dull, and I despised Enemy more than most. What made me truly hate Loom was that this was bait. Wake Up is a traditional Imagine Dragons song about being alone and being hated or whatever. It rocks and it's a good song, and that is literally it for the good on the album.
Everybody's coming, wake up. Some days I'm a chameleon.
And the rest of the album makes the pop songs on I Love You So Fucking Much look like goddamn ELO. They suck.
People are faded, that's when I miss you the most. Turn out the light. I can do this with my eyes. Oh yeah. What could ever go wrong?
My girl is banging. She's so low maintenance. No one wanted Imagine Dragons to make the same pop schlemiel as Coldplay and Nickelback. And for the record, I dread the goddamn day Imagine Draggies get put on the same pedestal as Nickelback, Coldplay, and fucking Maroon 5 do, where we have to pretend these bands are good because they get too much hate. I'm not in the fucking mood because the hatred Imagine Dragons get is their own goddamn fault. The band are in a tight squeeze where the best songs do nothing and their worst get popular, but the songs that get popular are exercise bike and treadmill songs like Believe Her and Natural, songs that you can jump and bop to, not their fucking lovey-dovey songs off Mercury, because that's the only reason the album's like that, and the band clearly knows no one would be into it, so they baited their audience with an old-fashioned song like Wake Up. Imagine Dragons have been fighting with their own haters forever, and somehow they never hit. But probably because fighting with your critics doesn't work anyway, especially when the songs are really good. I appreciate the effort, but maybe put that into the music you make. She got worried because I was yelling, "No!" She closed the FL Studio. Oh, we're good. She got scared because I was screaming about Imagine Dragons. Because they are generic and boring. Because they soundtrack truck commercials. I'm not saying they were ever that good. Their debut is boring, frankly. It's more that the success of the band is pushed onto us, and it was with Chicago, Nickelback, and Coldplay. That's the problem. I wouldn't mind Imagine Dragons if they weren't just making what they think makes them money, pretending to play into the villain role they can't, while producing generic album after generic album. You don't successfully play the villain by making the music that people don't care about. Why do you care so much? It's just a band. They're just making music. I care because I like good music and I like when good bands are good. Imagine Dragons can make good music, they just don't want to. And for the record, I am so sick of the rendezvous cycle where we have to look at every single goddamn hated act and reassess them over and over again. Because Imagine Dragons makes money and sells stuff, so theoretically they must be popular, right? The silent majority, if you will. Generic pop songs get put on the radio, they get put in playlists for grocery stores and venues, and they get put in commercials which boost their streaming numbers and sales, which help them over the music people listen to. The most popular artist of our generation, to me, to most people, is probably Kendrick Lamar, and I guarantee you people are more familiar with his music than the shit of Imagine Dragons. I don't care if they just make simple music. It's everywhere. They make a ton of money on it, and there are bands that also deserve the spotlight, that are being hogged out by one band who makes sometimes decent commercials. I'm done with this band. The fact you had to lie to me with your single to convince me to come crawling back proves that you don't care about making anything other than pleasing your shitty label vultures. Have fun living in the past. We're all moving on without you.